Alright then. So the first thing that we need is a Raspberry Pi. For people who don't know, Raspberry Pi is a low-cost credit card sized computer. It's the world's smallest computer. It looks something like this. Then we'll need an LED. The next thing is we need a mini breadboard for our connections. And yeah, 2 jumper wires. These are both male to female jumper wires. Alright, so to begin with, let's take our Raspberry Pi. As you can see, there are GPIO pins on the right hand side. Let's take a breadboard and connect our LED to the breadboard. There are 2 legs to the LED. One is smaller, the other is larger. The smaller one is the ground and the larger one is where we give the input, which could be VCC or any input which has 3.3 volts. Let's take the black jumper wire connected to the smaller leg of the LED. The other end of the jumper wire goes to the pin 3 of Raspberry Pi, which is the ground pin. The next thing we do is we take the red jumper wire, connect it to the other end of the LED, and we connect it to the VCC just to check if we are able to get that 3.3 volts from the Raspberry Pi directly. As you can see, it is giving us 3.3 volts and the LED is lighting as expected. But we want to do this programmatically, so I'll remove this and I'll put it in GPIO 4, which is the 4th pin. This GPIO 4 we'll be controlling using JavaScript programmatically. So our connections are done. We're good to go. So we will be using VS Code for coding today. There's an extension with VS Code which is really helpful. That is a remote SSH. Using this extension, we can directly access our Raspberry Pi on our VS Code. So after installing, you can see an icon on the left hand side. Yeah, and you can click on this plus icon and you need to enter your Raspberry Pi's IP address. In my case, it is 192.168.29.254. Select the first option for SSH configuration, and on the right hand side you can see the host is added. We can connect. Alternatively, on the left hand side there's this icon that I can click on to connect to the host. So now we can open the Raspberry Pi folders using VS Code. Okay. So as you can see, the file explorer has all the folders of Raspberry Pi. Now let's start with the configuration. The first thing that we want to do is we want to install Node. For that, we can run this command on the terminal. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to tell our Raspberry Pi where to look up for the Node.js. So we mention the URL and we mention the version of Node that we want, that is 16.x, which is currently the most stable version. This will take a few minutes. Right, the next thing that we do is we install Node.js, and the command for that is sudo apt install Node.js. This will also take a couple of minutes. Let's check the version of Node that we have. Okay, and npm. All right.
The next thing that you want to do
So now let's create a folder for our project in the desktop. Let's call it LED app, and let's go inside LED app and initialize our project using npm init. Let's keep everything default. Entry point, let's keep it app.js. Author Adesh Kulkarni. Okay. Now as you can see in list app, there should be a package.json. Let's refresh it. Alright. So this package.json has the configuration of our JavaScript project. It says that the app.js is the entry point of the application. Let's install the on-off library, which we'll be using to interface with the Raspberry Pi. We would also require an app.js file inside LED app folder. So after this, we might as well create one. Okay. So as you can see, package.json has this new dependency on off, which we just installed. Let's create app.js. Alright, let's start coding. So we require the on off library, specifically the GPIO object from on off. Let's create an LED variable which will point to GPIO 4 because we want the 4th pin, and set it to output because it is going to give us the output. led.writesync is the function which helps us update the value at the pin. So let's initialize a value to 1. Now we want to change the LED signal after every 2 seconds. So let's have set interval. Let's set it to 2000 milliseconds. And inside this, let's call the writesync method. So we need to change the value. So we'll use an XOR, which will, if it is 0, it will make 1. If it is 1, it will make 0. Let's initialize it to 0 and log it once so that we get it on the console as well. Alright, let's test it out. Shall we? Yes. So let's cd into our application directory and now use the node app.js command to start execution. So as you can see, the LED is blinking after every 2 seconds. Alright then.